Good evening. My name is Diane Allen, and I am the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Salisbury University. It's always a pleasure for me to come and welcome you to Salisbury University for this Riall Lecture. You know, the lecture has become a signature event on our campus, and it's really kind of like a tradition. And I would guess that if there are teachers in the audience, you might have attended this as a student. So we kind of pass the baton from one generation to the other. I really look forward to the Riall Lecture every fall and every spring. The speakers affirm my educational philosophy and practice, or they force me to pause, step back, and re-examine my beliefs. Either way, I grow a bit professionally every time I attend. So I hope you find this lecture as interesting and as motivating as I do. So the faculty will tell you that the word change is a permanent fixture in my vocabulary. So I'm really looking forward to Dr. Sahlberg's presentation tonight. When I was thinking about the lecture tonight, I wondered whether many years ago, when Mrs. Riall set up this lecture series, she ever thought about the impact her gift would have on generations of teachers and students. I wonder if she imagined that hundreds of teachers and thousands of students would benefit from those who came to SU to present lectures. I want to believe that Mrs. Riall established this lecture series because she knew that every teacher in every classroom at every level impacts someone in his or her classroom every day. It's through those someones that the teacher touches and changes the future. What a wonderful legacy that is that Mrs. Riall left us. And how lucky are we to be recipients of that? So let's continue that legacy tonight. I hope that you enjoy tonight's lecture and that you consider how you can impact the future.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Fiala, and I'm the Interim Dean of the Seidel School of Education and Professional Studies. This has really become one of my favorite events, too, and I did also want to take a moment to recognize Miss Pauline Riall. Miss Riall was a teacher and principal here, actually, in the campus school, and she used to serve in the Carruthers building that's now been replaced with the Academic Commons, which we're very eager about its opening next fall. But as Dr. Allen mentioned, when she passed, she left the gift of the lecture series as well as scholarships for our students to work and pursue their careers in the education community. So it's just very important to recognize her contribution and allowing us to be here tonight and see some world-renowned speakers. Every semester we have this opportunity. So I just wanted to pause for a moment and think about her and what she's done with that. Without her generous support, this occasion would not be possible. So we're very grateful for her gift. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Keith Connors, the chair of the Riall Lecture Committee, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you.
I wonder if anyone else was here in 1988 when we had the first Riall Lecture with Ernest Boyer. Dr. Anderson, Dr. Sires, that makes three of us. So let's hope some of you will be back here 28 years from now when we have our next one, or the last one. I want to thank everybody for supporting the lecture program as you do every semester. It's great to pack this auditorium the way we have. And before I introduce our speaker, I want to acknowledge some of the people who have worked to make this event possible. Would the members of the Riall Committee please stand? That's Ron Sires, John Andes, Chin-Soo Chen, Brandy Terrell, and our student representative, Amber Aaron. The committee's great, but the truth of the matter is most of the work is done by one person who's sitting over there next to Amber, and that's Lisa Nowak. Kappa Delta Pi, the International Honor Society for Education, has once again supplied tonight's ushers and booksellers. Our speaker will be available to sign copies of his book following the lecture in the social room just down the hall. Several campus offices have also played important roles: facility reservations, public relations, publications, media services, horticulture for the ferns, catering, event services, support services, and this spring we're also grateful to motor pool, because we had to send a driver to the Wilmington Amtrak station this afternoon to pick up our speaker, who was coming from an important meeting in New York City just this morning. And one of our education doctoral students, Susan Olson Lowry, was good enough to ride along and keep him company on the ride back from Wilmington. Thank you, Susan. We departed with tradition this evening and replaced the Riall dinner, which used to be held over in the Commons, with a reception just down the hall in the Great Hall before the lecture. We were delighted that so many faculty emeritus, alumni, and friends of the university were able to join us. As noted, the Riall Lecture is in its 29th year at Salisbury University. Maybe it's the 28th, but it's been a long time. It goes back a couple of name changes. When we started, we were Salisbury Normal School, then Salisbury Teachers College. And when the lecture series started, we were Salisbury State College, and then Salisbury State University, and now finally Salisbury University. The first students enrolled in Salisbury Normal School were deeply involved in their education courses 91 years ago in this very building, just as many of you are right now. Back in the day, there was no Fulton School of Liberal Arts or Henson School of Technology. Everybody at Salisbury was studying to become a teacher. Frank Perdue was an education major, folks. In light of that history, it's worth remembering the important role that Pauline Riall and her gifts have played in advancing this legacy of excellence in teacher education on the Eastern Shore. I won't bore you with all the details about our speaker, because you can read them in the program, and I'm sure many of you have already as you grabbed your seat early tonight. Dr. Pasi Sahlberg from Harvard has covered a lot of ground by train and car to get here today, and he has to fly back to Harvard tomorrow morning to teach a class. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Pasi Sahlberg.
Thank you so much. Good evening. How are you? Do you want me to speak English or Finnish? I know that there's some people here who say that it doesn't really matter too much. People, thank you so much for having me here. Wonderful to be here. What a beautiful hall. How many students we have? Raise your hand if you're a student in this university. Almost everybody. Now raise your hand if you're here because your teacher asked you to come here. Almost everybody. Thank you so much. You really made this easy for me tonight. At least you're honest. It's great to be here, really. I want to introduce one person here who is a very special one for me, Professor Steven Heinemann. Steven, stand up, please. Old friend and the new boy in town, right? Over here. Good. If you want to see this presentation, I'm going to show you little slides and pictures. The easiest way to find it is to follow me in Twitter or log into my Twitter account. Probably tonight or by tomorrow morning, I'm going to post this presentation there so that you can look at some of the graphs. But we're going to have fun. We're going to sing and we're going to do a little bit mathematics. Yeah. Anybody, raise your hand if you love mathematics. Almost everybody. Now, second question. Raise your hand if you think that you are good in mathematics. About 3 people. No, 5 people, okay? Now, normally when I speak about these things, about education around the world, here in the United States, and I've been everywhere. I've lived 3 years here now in Massachusetts, Cambridge. I spent 5 years in Washington, D.C. before, but I'm fine now. And everywhere I go, I always meet people who say that they love testing. You love standardized testing? But why do you do it so much then? Okay, let's see how good you are in mathematics. I have a very simple task for you to begin with. It's 8:30 in the evening, and we need to have some exercise. And let's see how good you really are in mathematics, right? So what I'm going to do for you here is that you're going to see some numbers appearing here, okay? So as soon as you see a number here, the only thing you need to do is to shout it out as loud as you can, okay? Do you do sports here? You have a sports team in this university? What is it called? Seagulls. Go Gulls. Okay. And you do football and baseball and all these things. Okay. You can choose your sport, okay? But let's assume that this is your team now, and you are just a tiny little bit behind the visitor, and you have to win to stay alive. You know, it's a win or go home thing, okay? So you have to shout. Use your voice here, okay? You see a number appearing here, you shout that number out as loud as you can, as if you were supporting your Seagulls team, right? When you see another number appearing there, you add that number to the previous one. Now, it's a little bit more complicated stuff. Normally, I do this with my primary school student, 3rd or 4th grade kids, so just to give you a reference, okay? When you see a third number appearing, you just add that number to the previous sum, and so on. And about 9 o'clock, we should be done. We understand? Okay, are you ready? Yes. No, I said, are you ready? Yes. Are you ready? Yes. Okay, let's see. 1, 2, 3, now. 1,000, 1,040, 2,040. You know what? Your seagulls are going to lose. This sounds a little bit like a chapel, by the way. You can do much better than this. That's what people told me when I came here, okay? Are you ready? No, are you ready? Yes. Are you ready? Yes. 1, 2, 3, go. 1,000, 1,040, louder. 2,040, 2,070, 3,070, 3,090, 4,090, 5,000. Wonderful. All right, now let's go to the very beginning again. Good evening, people. How are you? How many of you love mathematics? Raise your hand. 8 people. How many of you said, seriously now, how many of you said 5,000? Raise your hand if you said 5,000. Look around, people. You're not alone, okay? Now, if you really want to see these slides, go home and take your calculator and do the mathematics. Join me in Twitter and you're going to see this thing there, okay? Now, there's still somebody who is trying to figure out the arithmetics, right? It cannot be 4,100 because I said 5,000, right? So what is the point here? Why do I do this to you on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock in the evening? What's my point here? This is about education, right? Now, my point here is that if we make a mistake together in a simple thing like elementary school mathematics, okay, in about 15 seconds, we get it wrong. There's no question about it that people who try to reform our education systems that are much more complicated and complex things, that they will make a mistake, an error in the end of the day, right? These are complicated things, and we often make a mistake here because we do what everybody else seems to be doing, right? There are people here who actually did the mathematics right, and you're just about to say 4,100, right? But then you see people around you saying 5,000, and your brain says it must be 5,000 because everybody says 5,000, right? Okay? It's the same thing with education systems, and education systems are something like this. Look at this image here, okay? So it's a 3-dimensional mask. But what do you see there? You just see the one side, right? And it's the same thing. When you look at the education system in the country where I come from, Finland, you just see this one side. You see this one thing that you want to see. You don't see the things that you should see, okay? And that's why we have to be very careful if we are in a business of comparing our education, American education to other countries, or the Finnish education to somebody else, because they are very complex and complicated things to understand, okay? So keep this 4100 and this revolving mask in mind whenever you are in the business of comparing or learning from one another. My message tonight to you is that there are many things we can learn from one another, and one of those things is that we have learned, in Finland, we have learned so much from you guys, so much, okay? And there's no question about it that Americans, that you can also learn from us and many others. That's what I try to tell you tonight. Okay. Do you understand my English all right? Yeah. It's not very good, but it's okay. It's my third language, actually, that I speak. Okay, now, I have a second thing for you. Think about this being March or spring 2001. And this is the spring 2001 Riall Lecture. Is there anybody who was here in the 2001 lecture? I think Alfie Kohn was here with you then, right? Anybody listening Alfie Kohn 15 years ago here? A couple of people. Many of you were not even born that time. Yeah? Now, what I'm asking you to do is to try to imagine a little bit. You're all educated. You're gonna be teachers, and you're interested in these things. I'm going to take you back in time 15 years, okay? So this is spring 2001. And who you see here is your very, 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 very wealthy uncle from Finland that you didn't know exists. And I have so much money here that I can tell you, everybody here, that I'm going to send you anywhere in the world for a week, 5-star hotel, first-class flight, everything covered, okay? To learn about education. 1 week, you're going to choose one place, whatever it is, but you have to justify your travel to me by saying that I want to go there, place X, because I'm likely to learn interesting, inspiring things from that country. Do you understand? Now, first you have to think about how the world looked like 15 years ago when it comes to education. Who were the education systems or countries that were inspiring the others? Okay? Think about this now by yourself for a moment, just a few seconds. Where would you go if somebody would send you anywhere in the world? And what I'm going to ask you to do next is to turn to a person who is sitting next to you and tell him or her that I would like to go there because this and that, and then listen to what he or she has to say, okay? And the one who answers me first will get my book, okay? But I'm just going to give you like less than 1 minute to do this. So turn to your neighbor right now, 1 minute. Where would you go and why? Okay, very good. Thank you, people. Thank you. Who is going to go first? There's a lady over there. I'm going to run here. I'm going to give you a mic very quickly. Tell who you are and where would you go and why. I want to listen to you first and then give you the book. If you give me the right answer, right?
My name is Candace. And I want to teach in China because they're looking for English teachers that can teach full immersion English.
But my question is, what would you learn? Is there anything that you would bring back when you come from China back here to help you to improve education here?
Yes.
One thing. The book is almost yours, but I want to hear one thing.
That I would bring from China back here?
Yeah.
The cultural experience.
Try harder.
For my classroom, I'm bringing back something for my classroom.
For education in America in general.
Well, I feel like in America we're a little too soft, like on our children, and that over in China they're not as soft. So I would bring that back over here.
Like tiger mother type of stuff?
Excuse me.
Like a tiger mother type of mentality?
Yes.
Okay, I'll give you the book. Let's give a good hand to her. Wonderful, thank you. Anybody who wants to join her to China? Raise your hand if you wanted to go to China. There are a couple of, so I'll send you in my private jet, okay? I have a jet, takes about 8 people. Next one. Okay. Take the mic. Say your name, where would you like to go?
Okay, I'm Morgan, and I want to go to New Zealand because I studied them in middle school, and they're like not as big on standardized testing as we are, and I really don't like standardized testing.
Wonderful. Anybody else go to New Zealand? Raise your hand. There's a lot of stuff in New Zealand. Okay, we need about Boeing 373 for that. Okay, next one. Let's take up a couple of more. I want to hear some male voice here. Where would you go?
Okay, my name is Chris, and I would like to go to Finland to study the English education in Finland. Recently, I watched a video about the Finnish English education, and they said almost 70% Finnish can speak English very well with only 1,500 words. And my major is linguistics, so yeah, that's why I would like to research.
Thank you very much. It's a very good try, but it's a wrong answer. And I'll tell you why. Because year 2001, Finland didn't exist at all. Nobody knew where we were. Finnish education was not there. But it's a good try. I think that the English language education is a good. Anybody else wants to go to Finland when it's 2001? Nobody. That's right. I'm very happy for that. One more thing, and then I'll give you something else. Okay?
I'd have to say Germany.
Good. And why?
I feel with right now being at 2016 and Germany being the strongest economy in the European Union, they're obviously doing something right. So back in 2001, the people who would have been in school then are obviously leading that movement. So going to Germany in 2001, I feel being in that experience, you could bring something back.
Thank you so much. What's your name?
Daniel Sowers.
Daniel, thank you so much. Anybody else wants to join Daniel to Germany? Okay, let me ask you some other things. England. Who wants to go to England? Nobody. Canada. Canada. Any Canadians in the room? You're Canadian, right? Okay. Sweden. Get out of here. You're in the wrong room. France. Australia. Japan. How about this? United States of America. Quite a number of people. And you know what? You're all right, because in 2001, this country was the destination for so many people to come and look for inspiration. People like me. Okay? And that's why we are doing so great, because we came here. We took all your great ideas that you never used yourself. Okay. Okay. In the reception, you can continue the conversation about this. But my point is here simply. Can I shift to this mic, please? Okay. My point here is really that everything has changed in 15 years. Everything, the whole landscape, the geography of international education looks very different today than it was just 15 years ago. Okay, I'm going to show you quickly what has happened. If this was a conference or meeting like this 15 years ago, some of you here in this room would know that this year, later this year, year 2001, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, also known as OECD. How many of you know what the OECD is? Okay? It doesn't matter. But the OECD was about to publish for the first time ever the results of the new international student assessment called Pisa. Sometimes people call it Pasi, like my first name. It's not true. The Pisa, Program for International Student Assessment. Have you heard about Pisa? Raise your hand if you know Pisa. You should, because it's an important international education issue. But we didn't know about the results. Nobody had any idea what are the countries that are doing well. Is it New Zealand, Australia, or Germany, or Sweden, or Norway? There were a lot of candidates that were supposed to be doing very well in this first ever study. But I can tell you one thing. There was one country that had never any intentions to be on the top, and that country was Finland. Because, you know, in my country we say that as long as we are better than Sweden, anything goes. Okay? So that's why in the December 2001, when we saw these results coming out, this is how it looked like. The world media here in America and around the world reported these first results of the reading literacy study of the Pisa, the OECD Pisa, something like this. And most people were surprised. They were surprised to see that there's Finland, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, and South Korea there holding the top 6 positions there. Okay? So what made Finns particularly happy was, of course, the fact that Sweden was their number 9. And this is where the United States is somewhere there in the middle. But, you know, this created a kind of a question of what's going on? And it was the same question in my country. I was a professor at the university in Finland that time, and I remember that we exchanged some phone calls with my colleagues on the day when these results came out. And nobody had a clue how to explain this, nobody in my country. So we thought that maybe the OECD made a mistake in measuring Finland. Maybe they used kind of a centimeters with Finland when they were supposed to use inches. And that's why our score is like too good. So we decided to wait for 3 years, because we knew that 3 years from that time, the OECD comes again with the next cycle, the next round of this same study that will focus on mathematics, okay? And this is how it looked like, okay? So you will see again, there's Finland, South Korea, Netherlands, Japan, Canada, Belgium, Switzerland, again they're in the top. But still in my country, we are talking about December 2004, we didn't believe that this is true. We said that maybe the OECD made the same mistake twice. So let's wait another 3 years to see what's really going on, because the third one, 2006 study, was looking at science. So we wanted to see all of these things before doing anything else. And this is the 2006 table here. So if you look at these things now, if you look at the top 5 or 6 countries over there, that's something very different that people thought that the world was in 2001. Okay? So it's now we talk about the early 2008. It's about 6 years from now. Sorry, 8 years from now. And these are the countries that now everybody was looking at. Okay, and that's where the change came. That many educators, researchers, politicians, policymakers started to look at completely new places for inspiration and idea for the education thing. So for me, the significance of this study, this one single international assessment that is still going on, you're going to see the next results later this year in December, but these 3 studies, the first 3 or 4 PISA studies, created 2 new questions that people were not really thinking about like that before. The first question was, of course, what makes some of these education systems work well. Of course, everybody wanted to know what makes Finland, South Korea, Japan, Canada, the Netherlands, what are they doing to be able to continuously perform very well in this new international study? And then, of course, the other question is that what's going on in those countries and their education systems that where everybody thought will be doing well, but they are not really performing well. Do you see what I mean here? Okay? So these were the kind of a research type of questions that people like me and Stephen and many others, our colleagues around the world, were asking among themselves and doing research and trying to figure out how to explain these things. First of all, these are very difficult things to explain. You cannot find kind of a one explanation to say that 5 things explain these things, but you can try to identify the things that these countries are doing that is a kind of a common thing in all of these countries. I'm going to show you some of these things, first of all, here in this red dot here. So we are thinking about countries like yours, United States, England, France, Sweden, and many others. You know, one of those things, and I'm going to go fairly quickly this, because this is not, the details are not so important, and you understand what I'm saying here. The first one is that all of these countries, or most of them, thought for many years that competition is the best way to improve quality of education. Competition meaning that when the schools compete against one another, when parents have choice, and schools are competing over enrollment, that somehow will elevate the quality of the school's work. Teachers will teach better and principals will work harder and everything will be better. So that you can find in all of those education systems that have found it difficult to get any better. The other one is standardization. In these countries, practically all of them, there was a kind of a thinking that maybe the problem is with the standards, that we don't have high enough and clear enough standards for everybody, all the kids and all the schools and all the teachers. So that's why you see the Common Core here, and Germany has a state for the first time, the state standards, and many other countries, Australia and you name it, they have been in the business of creating these common universal standards for everybody. Test-based accountability is the third kind of a thriving idea in many of these countries, which means that you can see more and more frequent use of standardized testing that has been used for accountability purposes as well, holding teachers and schools accountable for students' test results, right? And this is a very common, you know what I'm talking about here in the United States, it's a very common, good example here. Then the deprofessionalization, and deprofessionalization here refers to the idea that the teaching profession has been open to also those people who are not really teachers, or who don't have a proper education, but who have a passion to teach. Or they may have had a career in some other field that they can, engineers, for example, that you can come and teach physics because you have the training, but you are not really a teacher. Or school principals in many countries have been people who have nothing to do with education, but they have been CEOs or managers somewhere else. And this has influenced in the teaching profession in many of these countries in a way that it's not really a profession anymore. It's something that you have different types of people working there. And then finally, the privatization idea that is very prevalent today, that you can see that public schools are increasingly handed over to charter schools and private operators, not only here in the United States, but everywhere. Thinking that somehow private providers or private-public partnerships are better in providing education, high-quality education for everybody, okay? Are you with me with this? Okay, so these are the things that you can probably easily identify here in America and many other countries, England and Australia, and it's going on. I'll show you how it looks like around the world. Now, this is a very different view, you know, if you analyze those countries that were doing quite good in this international study. They emphasize cooperation, collaboration, networking, doing things together, not compete against one another, but try to educate kids in their communities in collaboration. It's a very different philosophy, an idea of working as a teacher or school. Creativity rather than standardization, allowing teachers to use their minds and education to figure out what is the best way to create a kind of a learning space for their kids so that they will learn. Or individualizations, personalization of teaching rather than standardization. Trusting teachers and building a professional responsibility has been a very common thing in many of these, or most of these countries, rather than accountability that you see there. Professionalization, instead of what you saw there in the red dot, countries like Finland or Canada, for example, or now Singapore, Japan, they have even taken the kind of a teacher professionalism further by insisting that all the teachers must have master's degrees, just like lawyers and doctors and everybody else, so that they're truly professional. And nobody else can teach in Finland, for example, but those who really have a good, appropriate preparation and education to do that. And then finally, equity. Now, this is one of the key words now in this society here in America and really around the world that you can find in these countries, that they really believe that we need to help everybody to learn, not just some kids, okay? Well, you guys, you have this famous No Child Left Behind thing that didn't quite succeed with all of these things. But it tried to do the same thing. You know, the idea is the same, that every child should be successful regardless of where they come from. But now, the countries are very different in terms of what do they really do to enhance this equity, okay? Are you clear with what the equity means? Raise your hand if you have a kind of you're not quite sure what it is in education. I think you're not honest with me now. Because it's a very complex, it's a very complicated concept. That means several different things, okay? I'll speak a little bit more about that. But, you know, this is what I often call the global educational reform movement. I really love this acronym GERM because it's been behaving a little bit like a virus traveling around the world. And you can call this a Finnish way. or Canadian way, or the Dutch way, however you want to put it. But if you want to look at this germ, this is how the infection, if you think about germ as an infection, this is how it looks like. It started in England in the 1980s with their very famous reform, traveled to North America with the standardization and testing things, and then very rapidly around the world, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, Latin America, different places, and now it's everywhere. It's like looking at really like an infection map of the world. And in many ways, it behaves in the same way. If you think about, wonder, how did I get all these red dots there? I've been in all of these places and more. And every time I go in any of these places, I always ask the minister that, do you think that your country, your system has a little bit like infection of germ, of these things that we were talking about? And if the minister tells me that, yes, I think we have it a little bit, or it may be professors or teachers, then I paint this little dot there. And that's how it looks like. I don't know what Stephen thinks about the huge landmass of Russia there, but we have been in Siberia, so we know there's a different ball game altogether over there. Now, one thing I didn't say anything about is the technology. And this is something that's a very interesting question right now, what's going on around the world with the technology. Raise your hand if you think that technology will be a saving grace for education. Raise your hand if you think that technology will be more of a problem in our schools than solution. Now, whatever you think about this, I'm going to show you my first little video clip here. It's about 30 seconds, but it's kind of a nice thing to sit back and relax for a moment, just to give us a lesson that we need to be very careful with when it comes to technology.
Emma. Huh? Emma. 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 Emma.
Okay, it's a good thing, but we need to be careful what to ask because funny things can happen. I love technology, by the way, but I think that we need to be mindful with it. Let me speak a little bit about the equity, and then I'll show you. I'll finish by giving you 5 things that I think you or any of my American sisters and brothers can take with them from, if you want to learn something from the Finnish experience, and then we can have a little conversation here. So let me speak a little bit about what this equity actually means to me or us, and why is it important. Because I think it's the key, it's the number one thing here in America to make your education system better is this one. That's, if you ask my opinion, that's what's going to make you better or leave you there where you are right now if nothing happens. Now, what we can do now with the OECD, this is Pisa data and numbers that you saw there earlier, is something that we were not able to do 15 years ago. Remember, if this was Alfie Kohn here talking to you 15 years ago, he would not have been able to show anything like this. Okay? I love Alfie, but he couldn't do this. Yeah? You see what I mean? Okay? So this is equity here. Okay? So when we move from left to right, it means that the equity in the education system of education, we're looking at the whole systems, will get stronger. Okay? So the education systems that are somewhere here are the systems where the children's performance learning in school depends less of the family background, right? So if your education system is somewhere here on this side, it means that family background, where the kids come from, basically determines how well or poorly they do in school. You with me? Okay? And this is the easier one, the quality or excellence side here. The learning outcomes in math, reading, and science that are measured, if they are lower than the average over there, your system is somewhere here. And the higher you go, the better you do in math and reading and science, okay? So now, let me make this clear for you. If the education system is here, for example, if America is here in the red zone, it means that you have an issue, we have a kind of a twin challenge with quality that is lower than international average and equity that is worse than international average, right? If you are here, it means that your quality is better, but you have an issue with equity. If you are here, you have a strong equity, but the problem is with the quality of learning outcomes, okay? And this is where everybody would love to be, right? This is the area where you have strong equity and high outcomes, right? This is the dream place for any policymaker or minister or anybody who's leading the system, okay? Now, let me take this away and ask you next question. If there was such thing as American education system, where do you think it was? Now, while you think about this, let me tell you something. There is no such thing as American education system, right? You have 50 states, you have 15,000 districts, you have 100,000 schools, and many of them have a lot of autonomy and freedom to decide what to do, regardless of what the others are doing. So there's not really a thing called American school system. But the issue is that the OECD, where the data comes from, and your media, Fox News and CNN and all these outlets here, they report your performance as if there was American education system. Okay? There's no European education system in this sad day when people have been killed in Brussels. But we have a European Union with 28 states, and they are reported separately, very different systems, just like here. But now, if you should put your flag, American flag somewhere here, where would you put that? Turn to your neighbor again and say, where do you think American education system is in terms of equity and quality? 15 seconds for this, 15 seconds. Okay. Okay, how many of you, just for the sake of interest, how many of you had a similar view? Raise your hand if you had a similar view than the person who is sitting next to you. Okay, about half of you, okay? I'm going to show you according to the OECD, where America is here. It's right here. Now again, raise your hand if you're surprised, if your first reaction is that you're surprised. Most of you, okay? It's okay. Because this is not what you see in the news, in the media, right? The media says, like Donald Trump, sorry to say that, but he says that the world is beating America, right? That you are lagging behind. But Donald is not right in this. Most people are not right because they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to education, right? United States, according to the international data and evidence, is about the average, just like the European Union, exactly the same way. Or look at these countries. Australia, not very different from the United States, okay? And this is United Kingdom. Now, some people conclude that, if you speak only English in your country, you're average. And honestly speaking, I think that if you want to improve your performance, make sure that every child in America has a right to study another language. Doesn't matter what it is. That's what we do. That's what they do in Belgium and Sweden, Singapore, many other countries, and particularly this is what they do in Canada. Look at this. Any Canadians in the room? Raise your hand if you're Canadian. Where are you from? Ontario, okay. Now, Canada is one of those education systems that has both equity and quality simultaneously, and it's a kind of a miracle thing. And it's not only Canada as a federation. Most of the Canadian provinces are there. Quebec, Alberta, Ontario, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, they're all there. They're doing very, very well. They're doing much better than the United States is doing compared to these two things. Actually, Canada is doing so well that I said that Canada is in heaven. This is where, if you're there, you are in heaven, really, right? Okay, let me show you some other countries. These are all the OECD countries, 34 wealthiest nations in the world. And you see something interesting if you look at these flags where they find their places in this map here. They're not all over the place, right? They're somehow, if you take, this is Sweden, this is Iceland, Norway, Italy. Just forget these for a moment, and you will see that they're very nicely here. South Korea, Japan, Estonia, right? And Canada, they're very nicely here in the line. What does it mean? It means that there's some type of dependency between equity and quality. We call it correlation, right? They correlate. Remember, it's not causation, so you cannot say anything about one thing causing the other, but there's a correlation that indicates that there's maybe something between these two important variables, right? Now, I often use this image here just to help you to remember that it's like, if you remember this and you look at these countries, it's like Stairway to Heaven. Remember this song? It goes something like this.
There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying the stairway to heaven.
That's the American way, remember? If you want to improve your education system, you have to walk the stairway to heaven. And it means that you have to work with equity and quality simultaneously, have a smarter policies that address both of these things. Now, where's Finland here? Do you know how Finnish flag looks like? I'll give you a hint. It's the most beautiful flag in the world. Doesn't help much. This is where we were 40 years ago, and this is now interesting because this is how Finnish educational performance, according to my judgment, looked like 30 or 40 years ago, in the 1970s or 80s. And we decided to redesign the whole system by doing the parallel system away, create one comprehensive school system where all the kids go to the similar school, no private schools, no school, very controlled school choice, so that we insisted that every school must be a good school. And every teacher must be well prepared and educated to work in these good schools. Now, if you look at this Finnish flag, I'm going to show you what has happened since those days, 30 years ago. Take a look at this. Right there, in the middle of heaven. So there are 5 countries now that the OECD and the others are recognizing as a high-performing or successful systems because they have both equity and quality. I'm going to speak a little bit about, just mention a few things, what is behind, what constitutes this equity work here, but I leave the rest to you, so you can buy my book outside there, and there's a good recipe for you to understand more about what it takes to make your system more equitable. But let me show you just this one here. These are some of those countries that America often envies, right? Your former Secretary for Education was often saying that America should be like Singapore or Shanghai. Hundreds of American delegations, people, experts, have visited these places to learn how to make America look more like those countries. But you see that they are not really equitable, right? They have an issue with equity. They have very high quality, but the students' learning there depends so much on where they come from. Okay? Now, what is this country here? Netherlands. Any Dutch people in the room here? Are you Dutch? Or you want to be Dutch? That's fine. I would love to be Dutch because they're very nice. They're very nice people. If you look at the Netherlands, they're so close to heaven that they are almost like knocking on heaven's door. Remember that? And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is your rare opportunity to sing with me if you want to do that. Remember this song? I love Maryland. Now I sound like Donald Trump again. Sorry about that. But I love you people, seriously. You're beautiful. I'm going to be back here several times, many times. This is huge. This is for those who support Bernie. All right. Now, let me close by this. Just leave you quickly 5 things to think about, because I know that many people are here to also learn, asking the question, so what should we do? What can we do here in this great country to make our education system even better, okay? But remember, when you leave here, you should leave with the thinking that American education system is not horrible, it's not bad, it's not failing. There are many schools here that are failing too many kids, but the system as such is not failing. If anything is failing, I think that your big part of your society is failing a lot of people in this country, including teachers and educators. Okay, 5 lessons, and this is the obvious one. I think that you need to invest more heavily and systematically in equity. And this means, first of all, it means that I think that schools should be funded here in America based on their needs, not based on the wealth of the community or the district. I think that you should finance the special education as it should be financed, so that every single school and child would have access to high-quality special needs education. I think in this country, where about half of your kids come from poor homes or poverty, you should provide healthy meal, health care, dental care, all those other services that we do in Finland every day for all the children. Okay? I think in this country, if you want to take equity more seriously, you should dedicate to developing whole child, not just math and reading and science, because that's a core part of making your system more equitable. So think harder about equity, what it means, and insist your legislators, your policymakers, to do the same. Have a policy or program that will take, follow you on the stairway to heaven. And you can remind them of this evidence that is not my idea, this is what the OECD is saying, that the most successful education systems are those that combine equity and quality. This is international global evidence based on data. Okay? So keep this in mind and carry on the message. I'm going to show you a little clip so that you can see, this is just a couple of minutes or minute and a half, so that you can see how Finnish teachers look like. There's one teacher, special ed teacher here, speaking about how the special education works in Finland. And you will see a classroom in a very typical, regular public school in Helsinki. Actually, it's a rough neighborhood school that you will see, but just pay attention to how this teacher is speaking about her school and what they are doing with the kids. It's a very different discourse than in many other countries.
About 7 miles from the center of Helsinki, in a more economically challenged part of town, Vesala Comprehensive School looks a little more like what you might find in a Milwaukee inner-city school. It has a diverse population of students and many families who struggle to make ends meet. Special education teacher Nina Halonen-Meliadakis says their school moves more slowly than others because many of their immigrant children come to school not speaking Finnish or English as a first language.
I think we realize that at our school the speed we go forward is slower than in many other places, because even though we provide more help into the classroom, they still can't go ahead the same way than maybe somewhere else in Helsinki. So we really concentrate on the basic skills. I think that the level of the basic skills of the students who leave from our school are even probably higher than the other schools. Learning the basic skills like how to study and what to think about their future and learn to deal with things on your own. Those are the things you learn probably better here because we spent a lot of time on these basic things.
Even the Finns can't tell you exactly why they've scored so high on an international standardized test known as Pisa. But they do believe that a selective teacher training program, a national curriculum, and an immense amount of support for struggling students has helped improve achievement levels.
We're all, I guess, trying to find out why we're doing so well in the PISA, because there's definitely no one answer. It's something we're like laughing a little. When we hear the results, we're like, oh, okay, why? We don't really... Of course, the thing is, I told you earlier, we in Finland people respect people who educate, who are working in education, and I think the educators themselves give respect to themselves. We feel important. I think it's actually quite an important factor that you feel important as a teacher. And when you tell somebody I'm a teacher, nobody tells you, oh, you should be doing something else. Why aren't you a doctor or engineer or something? People say, okay, good, you're doing a good job.
Okay, my second takeaway from here is that I think you need to, and we all actually, but you particularly here in the United States, that you need to invest more in teams, collaboration, teachers and people working together rather than just individuals or human capital development. I think that America is too much obsessed in education of finding the best and the brightest people into teaching, and it's undermining the fact that the cooperation, teamwork is actually what makes schools also work better. If you don't believe what I'm saying, just look at many of the studies in the United States that have been looking at this. This is Carrie Liana's work. She's been doing a lot of work in Pittsburgh around this, where she and her team, they have found that as soon as you invest in teamwork, even those teachers that are normally not very good in working alone will be doing better because they learn and get strength and power from their colleagues through the cooperation. So I think that's the key here, and you can do much better than you are doing now by having better policies that will encourage and reward also the collaboration and working together, just like we do in Finland or Japanese or Singaporeans or many others have been doing this for quite some time. The third one, this is my favorite one, let the children play. Okay? And this is something, if there's one thing that breaks my heart when I travel around the United States in different states and districts and schools, is exactly this. That I see more and more schools and classrooms where there's no recess anymore, there's no playgrounds anymore, there's no physical education, and music has been taken away because the kids need to be educated to do well in math and reading tests, right? And this is something, it's a violation against the international agreements that we all have made to make sure that children have time to play, and we adults, we have to protect that right, okay? But here in America, in many parts, I don't see this happening anymore. Take a look at this, how the Finnish typical fourth grade school day looks like. And this is just an example. We have many more subjects than this one, but this is just one day. Let's assume that it's today in the fourth grade school in Finland. So first of all, the class lesson is 45 minutes, and it's always followed by 15 minutes recess. Kids put their boots on and coats on, and they go out and play. Unstructured, free play in the playground, okay? Then they come to the next class. They have a lunch break. Every school provides free lunch, healthy lunch for everybody every day. And then they have another subject, break. They go out and play. Another subject, go out and play, and so on. So every school does this on a regular basis. Actually, this 15 minutes is a children's right. Legally, it's their right to do things, but it's also right for teachers to go to the teacher's lounge and have a cup of coffee and talk about the work that they have been doing there, right? Homework issue. If you go and see Michael Moore's new film that I highly recommend, Where to Invade Next, which is a kind of an interesting thing also for educators, you will see something that I disagree with Michael's kind of a takeaway from Finland, because he's saying that Finland, there's no homework. That's not true. But we have much less homework than many other countries. Normally, students, if you ask them in the middle school and primary school, say that they have less than half an hour homework every day. Many of them say that they have no homework at all because they try to do everything, all these things in school. Okay? So that's how we try to do this. Then the fourth one, and this is one of my favorite ones really here too. I think you should try to make a better use of the old innovations here in America that have made other countries great. You know, if you ask Finland teachers or researchers, anybody there, that where did you get all those great ideas for your pedagogy, your school leadership, assessment, you know, all these things, how to improve schools, most people would say that from America. American innovation that has made Finland, and not only Finland, Singapore, Japan, Canada, the Netherlands, many other countries great. So, you know, people, one thing I don't understand here, that why you don't do those things here that has made all the other education systems perform well, because they are your ideas. But thank you very much for those. It's a great, it's a free service for us. But seriously speaking, I think I see too much talking about innovation, like a next innovation. You go to education conference here, and every other session is about innovation this and innovation that. I think we need to innovate, we need to figure out what to do next, but I see much less about things that how to make better use of the theory of multiple intelligences, for example, that my colleague at Harvard has been working for 40 years here, or cooperative learning, or authentic assessments, or many other things. That I don't see those things anymore exercised and used here than they should be, okay? So look back for a moment and try to identify all those great ideas that you have done here during the last 50 years. And finally, this is my last one, and a very serious one. I think you need to, you should be concerned, just like I am, about the health of your kids, younger people here, and not only here, but in Finland and many other countries. I think it's alarming to see in many places how the health is disappearing from children's lives. I think one thing you can do, and this is again an American idea, is to teach our children that health is a skill. It's not a thing. It's not the information that you know. It's a skill that we all need to have, that we need to learn how to take care of ourselves, to eat healthy, live healthy, move healthy, drink healthy, and do all those things so that we understand this. And there wouldn't be a better way to close my words here for you this evening than doing it with the American poet a friend of mine from New England, from New York City right now, called Taylor Malley. Some of you probably know him. The students you probably don't know. But pay attention to this little poem that Taylor is reading for you about this thing. It's called An Apple a Day is Not Enough. And with this, I close this evening. I thank you very much. I'm happy to take a couple of questions before the reception if there's the time. But take a look at what Taylor has to say and think about this health thing next.
An apple a day is not enough. Don't let me start preaching. But shouldn't the children of the country that's the wealthiest also be the children of the country that's the healthiest? That makes sense. You'd think that would be true. I know I would. I'm just saying, wouldn't you? But that's not the case with our kids these days. Kids' health is declining in all kinds of ways. We need to improve it. We can, and we will. But it starts with thinking of health as a skill, a 21st century skill that you practice. Practice makes perfect. The unhealthy can't hack this. We've got to teach our kids by example every day. And it's tough because people stop listening when they think they know what you're going to say, like drink more water, eat more vegetables, especially the dark leafy green ones, eat less sugar, don't drink soda, especially the sugary caffeine ones, stop watching TV, go play outside, go for a run or a walk or a bike ride, get your heart rate up every day of the week. Chew your food more, eat slower, meditate, sit still, get your heart rate lower. Set yourself a health goal. It doesn't have to be wild. It takes a lot of things to raise a healthy child. And healthy kids do better in school. They have better jobs. They lead better lives. They marry healthier husbands and healthier wives. Good health is a skill, and teachers need to teach it. Now you got me preaching, so I might as well preach it. Health is not a one-semester class you take in middle school. It should be a part of every subject. Not the exception, but the rule. Learn about good health in math, in English, and in social studies. Work on a project about nutrition in science with your buddies. And parents need to be involved too. Teachers can't do this alone. Good health starts at home. We need to own this issue because the stakes are high. What does it matter if we try to increase our scores in math and reading if scores are dying before their time because they got fatter and fatter? Healthy students make wealthy earners, not to mention better learners. The choices you make every day have the biggest impact in the biggest of ways. Check it. Why else would they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away? But new solutions to old problems. That's the American way. Who cares about keeping the water clean and pure? There isn't a problem if they can't sell you the cure. Don't keep looking for new technology to be your medical savior. Of course, it's easier to be saved by a miracle than it is to change your behavior. So we need to value health education the way we value math and reading. We can't keep feeding our children the same old lessons like junk food full of saturated fat and sugar and chemicals. We can do better than that. We can and we will. And that's the truth, because the future belongs to the healthy youth. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have some time for questions? What is the situation now? 5 minutes? Is there anybody who wants to ask a question? Can bring a mic. Oh, are you tired already? Okay, let's take one question.
Hi, I'm Naya. My question is, since we use standardized testings to evaluate our teachers and our students, what do you do in Finland?
Well, we don't have standardized testing at all. We use the sample-based assessments, and then teachers are assessing their students in every class, in every school. Actually, there's only one kind of an external examination that is in the very end of the high school, but it's in the end of the high school when the kids have already done their schooling. But before that, Finnish children don't sit any standardized tests at all. It's done in a different way. You can take a look at that if you want to in detail, because it's a very smart and cheap policy. Anybody else? Second question here.
Hi, I'm Katie. They labeled South Korea as one of the ideal schools in heaven, but South Korea also has one of the highest rates of student suicide. So does it really matter if they're high achieving and high equity if they're dead?
Great and very important question as well. And that, that's exactly, you are pointing to a kind of one of the weaknesses of these international studies, because they're only looking at the academic performance, and in this case that I showed to you also equity. But if you put happiness there, for example, or health or well-being, then of course this map looks very different. But unfortunately, we are not doing that yet in a kind of a systematic way that we could compare those things. There are some comparisons where you can see how the countries are doing if you take into account some of these aspects, but it's a different thing. But it's a very, very important point. One more question, and then we close the shop. I have to go here. Okay.
So my Swedish sources
I'm sorry about that.
tell me that one of the advantages that the Finns have is not very many recent immigrants, and instead you have the advantages of a monoculture for your school system. And is that really part of what's going on?
Yeah, another great question. Of course, all of these things influence in how the school systems are doing. Sweden has somewhat more diversity in the school system than Finland has. But if you look at the OECD data that has been trying to calculate the effect of the immigrant or non-Swedish or Finnish or German-born students, is not really that much. That doesn't explain, for example, the difference between Sweden and Finland. You cannot explain all of this huge gap there by saying that Sweden has more diverse student population than Finland has. But I'm not saying that would not have any influence, but that is so big gap there that there has to be something else. Actually, I'm sitting in the Swedish Education Minister's School Commission now, so I'm looking at the Swedish situation very closely now, and there are some interesting things that I think explain that more than anything else. One of them is that school systems in Sweden and Finland 30 years ago when we started were identical. They were very similar systems. But then what Finland did that Sweden never didn't, and Norway didn't, is to take this teacher education reform to the very end. That we elevated the teacher education in Finland to our research universities and master's degree level. This is what Sweden didn't do. And my guess would be that if Sweden had done that at the same time when we did actually 35 years ago, the situation in Sweden would be very, very different now. But it's mostly, I explain the Swedish situation mostly by the fact that so many young people turn away from teaching because inappropriate or not relevant education that they had, and some other things in the teacher policies there. But it's a great question. I think it's a great question overall for everybody to ask how much the diversity and immigration and this migration that we see now in the world will influence. If you had asked this question for the future, that how in my country, Finland, that has been a destination of so many immigrants now during the last year or 18 months, how this will influence the school system, it probably will have a kind of a visible influence as well there. But in the end, it's very difficult to explain, identify exactly where these goods or bads will depend on. Thank you for your question. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful. Thank you.